Donald Trump's return to the White House has sent shockwaves through the whole Europe, sparking fears of significant challenges for the continent. His America First policies, unpredictability and transactional approach to the global affairs threaten to undermine strategic, economic and political ties between the US and Europe. Key concerns include the potential weakening of NATO, emboldening of illiberal nationalists, a transatlantic trade war, and conflicts over regulation of the US tech companies. Europe also faces the risk of being caught in the crossfire of escalating US-China tensions as European leaders huddle in emergency meetings. One question's echo across the continent. How will Europe weather the Trump tempests? That's our story. Welcome to In Depth.
We can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, and indeed the whole world. USA! This is a magnificent victory for the American people. Promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again.
Well, welcome back. And Donald Trump's second term could spell disaster for Ukraine, with Europe facing internal disarray and political instability, making it unlikely to avert this crisis. Guardian reported that Ukrainians, frustrated by Biden's approach, see Trump as a potential surprise, though most expect him to impose a peace settlement that favors Russia. Trump's plan could reduce US support for Ukraine, forcing it into a weaker position where Kiev must make severe concessions. Meanwhile, Europe would need to increase defense spending and contribute significantly to Ukraine's funding. Yet, divisions within the continent, with pro-Trump leaders gaining influence, complicate a unified response. Donald Trump's re-election has reignited fears of escalating US protectionism, raising concerns over new tariffs that could intensify global trade tensions already strained by the EU-China standoff. The National News reported that export-heavy economies like Germany are at risk, with industrial production slumming and GDP growth projection low. Mr. Trump's proposed tariffs up to 60% on Chinese imports threaten to worsen economic challenges for Europe, especially in manufacturing sectors like automotive and technology. Retaliatory measures from China and Europe could further disrupt global supply chains, raising costs and showing growth. If implemented, these policies could reshape the global economic order, increasing inflation and dividing international alliances. Right, before we get back to our interviews, let's have a look at the report about Trump's return that fuels European fears. Stay tuned.
As the 2024 US presidential election concludes, Donald Trump's return to the White House is sparking anxiety across Europe. Fears prevalent during his first term are now resurfacing. European leaders are bracing for a new era of economic protectionism and geopolitical uncertainty. Trump's proposed tariffs, ranging from 10% to 20%, threaten to disrupt the delicate balance of transatlantic trade. The specter of a trade war looms large, with European exports potentially caught in the crossfire. But it's not just economics that has Europe on edge. Trump's skepticism towards NATO and his transactional approach to foreign policy have raised alarm bells about the future of European security. Many believe that Trump's promise to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours will force Ukraine to grant territorial concessions to Russia. The ripple effects of Trump's victory extend beyond policy concerns.
We win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly.
There is growing apprehension that his success could embolden right-wing populist movements across Europe, thus altering the continent's political landscape. Amid the uncertainty, French President Emmanuel Macron revived calls for European strategic autonomy. He argued that Europeans should no longer entirely delegate their security to the Americans and must defend their interests more broadly against both the US and China. Yet, some see a silver lining. Trump's win might galvanize European leaders to strengthen their own defense capabilities and foster greater unity within the EU. As Europe grapples with this new reality, one thing is clear: the transatlantic relationship is entering uncharted waters, and Europe must navigate carefully to protect its interests in the years ahead.
We can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, and indeed the whole world. USA! This is a magnificent victory for the American people. Promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises. Nothing will stop me from keeping my word to you, the people. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again.
Right, welcome back, and I guess we'll be in a short break until we get back to you with the interviews. In the meanwhile, the Kremlin has said that President Vladimir Putin is ready to discuss Ukraine with Donald Trump. The US President-elect, the Kremlin, stated that this does not imply any shift in Putin's demands, reaffirming that Russia's goals in Ukraine remain unchanged. Putin congratulated Donald Trump on winning the US election and praised him for showing courage when a gunman tried to assassinate him. He also said Moscow was ready for dialogue with the Republican president-elect. Now we'll welcome back, and in a short break, and welcome back. Right, welcome back. Back to you, Dr. Romanovsky, and again, let me ask you again, how will Trump's second term impact NATO's credibility and unity?
Well, it's a great question, because Trump's re-election signals a profound transformation not only in EU-European relation, in EU global relation, but clearly it will impact the NATO role in it, especially in the line of Ukraine conflict and the economic policies, because we have to take into account as well that as much as NATO is about defense, is about, especially now, about the defense spendings and the defense innovation. First of all, we will, in my opinion, observe very soon quite big pressure on defense spending. Trump will definitely repeat criticism of NATO alliance spending, which I do believe will intensify in a quite big way. I think that the 2% of GDP target, most likely, in my opinion, will be even enhanced. Maybe it will be 3% of GDP, because everyone knows that now defense is more and more important, especially in the time of crisis. Bearing in mind that Commissioner designate for defense industry and space of the European Commission is as well calling for greater European responsibility in defense. We can actually see from both sides quite big push to ensure that there is more spending on defense from both NATO states and EU states, which basically most of them are the NATO members anyways. I think that there will be as well changes when it comes to the NATO Eastern flank organization as well as role. Because we could see that particularly in Poland and in the Baltic states, there is a huge concern when it comes to the US commitment to deterring Russian aggression to Ukraine. Most likely there will be some changes when it comes to the US military involvement and maybe even more EU-NATO coordination. But in my opinion, especially bearing in mind what Macron has said, we can actually see here the potential gaps. But in my opinion, that will be as well not filled by reduced American presence in NATO, but rather in changing of the context of NATO and context of US, let's say, hegemony within this structure. I believe that the more defense and more innovations, maybe even, let's say, enlarged defense spending and enlarged budget for NATO DIANA, defense and innovator accelerators for North Atlantic will be, let's say honest, put more in a business way. So making more profits and ensuring that actually defense innovation and defense spendings are, let's say, honestly augmented to ensure that even if there is a change of American position towards the war in Ukraine, and maybe there will be a reduction in US support, same time, I do believe that this idea of Trump, let's be honest as well, brought by President of Poland, Andrzej Duda, who is a good friend of him, maybe not great, but quite good and good ally, and new forged Trumps, which will be as well most likely NATO enhanced in the region, will be created. And I believe that we can see here that Trump will treat it really as an impact on a key sector and make it from America first,
yes,
but America first globally point.
Yes, indeed, and we'll go to this America first. But before we go, let me here take Ms. Sadler and how seriously Europe should be taking Trump's promise to end the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours, and what impact would that have on the NATO?
Well, I think NATO and European and most importantly, Putin needs to take Trump's commitment to bringing this war, avoidable war, to a conclusion quickly, very seriously.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that would really affect the NATO?
Well, what's been missing since the beginning of this second invasion of Ukraine by Putin is any strategic plan that understands what actually would deter Putin and bring him to, at this stage, the negotiating table. And that's a peace through strength and a very clear articulation of that through, military posture, which has been absent to date. And so I think what's on the table and what's probably coming is a more forceful position from the U.S. backing with NATO, that the time is now to come to a ceasefire and an end of this current fighting and a conclusion that is agreeable to U.S. interest, but also NATO, and also importantly to Ukraine. It cannot be a total victory for Putin at any cost. And I think the consensus here in D.C. across all political stripes is that is a red line.
We're not aware yet with the approach Mr. Trump is will be going through, but yes, this is from your own perspective. Let me get back to Mr. Romanovska and to Mrs. Romanovska. Mrs. Romanovska, if I may ask you, will Europe be forced to confront its own defense capabilities without the US support, that if Trump decided to maintain this approach of America first?
Well, we have to look from the slightly other perspective, because it's not just Putin who is in good terms with Trump, but Macron Emmanuel Macron, the first president of the France, is in quite good terms with him as well. And both him and the new commissioner of the European Union on defense, they both advocate for a bolster of EU defense policy to reduce reliance on the US military support. But at the same time, this could OSCE military or it may be defense and security project. But going back to EU, I definitely will seek the more cooperative security initiatives among EU member states based on PESCO framework, but as well, let's say, based on so-called IPA, so the partnership agreements with countries who are trying to be members of the EU. That might be the case that Ursula von der Leyen, alongside the future Foreign Affairs Commissioner Kaja Kallas, will really ensure to establish another perspective, another structural cooperation with Trump as well, to ensure clarity, but the same time to share the global challenges and make the stronger emphasis from, let's say, war in Ukraine to terrorism, migration, and economic stability in a more geopolitical point of view. I would see here that maybe the America First will be rather seen in trade policies and possible, let's say, higher involvement of the real high-profile advisors like Brooke Rollins from America First Policy Institute, who, let's say, will focus more on tariffs and imports from Europe. But at the same time, America will be as well the country who really want to be first globally as well. So when you can see the Macron and same time Olaf Scholz, who are now in quite big trouble because of the problems with his own HQ and the problem with the government stability, we will see that Europe will be prepared to bolster independent support for Ukraine, which will cost, obviously, a lot of money. That will be as well more greater EU-led security frameworks, especially bearing in mind the geopolitical situation. Poland and Baltic states are most likely advocate about substantial EU defense package for Ukraine, but at the same time substantial EU defense package for themselves, for all those countries who are at the external border of the EU, or for those countries who are actually trying to apply to be EU as well, to ensure that global stability within the region, within the Europe, is more secure. Let's not forget also that now Trump is saying America first as well. But honestly, we don't know what Trump means by ending war in 24 hours. That might be, let's put it straight, pushing forward to have the ceasefire. But at the same time as well, that might be a potential situation of Trump actually acting as a quite strong judge and arbitrator and making a Solomon decision of divide the territories in concern in half and putting just like it was previously in certain states or in Germany after the Second World War, so-called area of influence. I think that what Trump means by putting thing of 24 hours for bringing back peace definitely will lead to more European cooperation, but at the same time will lead as well to stop of those who are helping Putin. And I mean here the North Koreans, the Iran. They are not the biggest friends of the President Trump. And let's not forget as well that the quite close, especially such important ally as Turkey is, will definitely lead to the global MENA, Middle and Maghreb policy change, as well as different take to, let's say, curb the enthusiasm to cooperation with Iran from Russia, but same time ensuring that the war, the global one, which might be led by the conflict based on political issues with which Trump has himself.
I'm sorry, do I understand well? You mean here that the threat of a global war is much less in the meanwhile?
I think that for Trump it's much more important, and he will ensure that curbing the war in Ukraine will go alongside the curbing the war and threats which are related to Iran presence and Iran more opulent influence on the Russian defense and Russian arms, such as the Shahid drones. So I do believe that this not necessarily leads to the ending war right away, but it will mean that he will seriously take into account regaining US and America first influence globally.
Yeah, right. So your point here is clear, and that was Dr. Kamila Zarichta-Romanovska, a professor of EU law and security studies from Brussels, and Bryn Sutler, a former Pentagon official from Washington. We thank you both for your insights, and I guess that brings us to the end of this episode of In Depth. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed for real-time updates. Connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.